Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh from Studio North. Good morning. I'm pleased to welcome back former UN Ambassador, former Governor of South Carolina, and Nikki Haley. Ambassador Haley, good morning. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning from Manchester, New Hampshire.
Oh, you're not too far away. I'm up north. Quite a storm going on right now.
Yes,
Ambassador Haley, I want to begin. I've complimented the former Vice President Pence because he has a son and son-in-law on active duty. I've complimented Ron DeSantis. He's a veteran. You are a veteran military spouse. I believe your husband is deployed as we speak, correct?
Yes, he is currently deployed.
Okay. So is he an officer?
Yes.
Well, I just talked with Mike Gallagher about this. Senator Tuberville has a hold on more than 300 general officers, colonels who want to promote to general, captains who want to promote to admiral, and then everyone 1-star to 2-star on up. We don't have a commandant of the Marine Corps. We do not have a chief of staff of the Army for the first time in 200 years. More than 300 vacancies. It's a mess. And I know that the Pentagon has violated the Hyde Amendment, and I know you're pro-life. But would you call Senator Tuberville and ask him to stop screwing up the military? Because we're on the brink of a conflict with China, and we cannot have this.
Well, look, this just goes to show how messed up our country is. I mean, you look at the fact that the Department of Defense shouldn't be doing this in the first place, but there's got to be other ways to go about doing this. In a time where our recruitment's 25% down and 80% of those recruits typically come from military families, and military parents are telling their kids not to go into the military, it's because they don't feel like anybody's got the military's back. They look at the fact that 33,000 veterans are homeless. They look at the fact that they're, dangling these promotions out there and using them as fodder. I mean, they're looking at the fact that people don't see these men and women who serve as heroes anymore. And that's sad and it's terrible. And, I appreciate what Tuberville's trying to do. I do. Like, it's totally wrong that the Department of Defense is doing this. But have we gotten so low that this is how we have to go about stopping it? I mean, at what point can we not go and have, congressional members go to the Department of Defense and say, look, you have to go through Congress if you're going to do this. You can't suddenly, decide you're going to do this. Don't make us have to do this. I just think it shouldn't get to this point. And, for my husband who's serving overseas and for all those military men and women, the idea that this is what they're looking back and seeing and this is what they are dealing with on top of the stresses of keeping themselves safe and being away from their families, it's wrong.
Ambassador Haley, thank you for saying that. I talked to an officer last week who told me not about himself, but about a friend who is facing a 1-year deployment in tough circumstances. I don't know if he's going to Djibouti. I don't know where they're going. There are some tough places to serve a year. And it's not Navy because usually they do 6-month and 9-month deployments, but a year in a tough place, but they can't start. So the family's in limbo. You've been there, right? You know what that month is before deployment. Now that month is 6 months. Now it's a year, and they're just in limbo. It's horrible.
It's incredibly stressful for the family, but it's incredibly stressful for the service member because their life is on hold. And it's enough to try and get ready for something like that. But, for any military family, they can agree with me that once they have the assignment that they have to go, they just want to go and get it over with. They just want to go ahead and get it done. And, it goes to the heart of we don't treat our military men and women, servicemen and women well. We don't treat our veterans well. And, my parents always taught us you take care of those who take care of you. And I think it's shameful from the way that, we're making veterans have to wait 29 days to get a doctor's appointment, to the idea that, you're dealing with a Department of Defense that's not focused on making sure that our military has the equipment, ammunition up to date that they need. Instead, they want them taking gender pronoun classes. We've got a serious problem when you've got China threatening us, Russia threatening us, Iran threatening us, and we're going to sit there and play games like this. It's just wrong.
On a political level, I also think it's completely disastrous for anyone on the Republican side, the party of defense, to have a Republican senator doing this. But I'll come back to that. China ran 11 ships in concert with Russia down past the Aleutians last week. I said last night on Brett Baer's show, I want us to send 11 ships to the Taiwan Strait in response. I don't want to, they didn't come into our waters, but I think we're on the brink of a conflict with China, Ambassador Haley. What do you think?
I think that we should make sure we're not in a conflict with China, and I think that President Biden's doing everything he can to make sure that we walk into it. You don't run scared from China. You have to be strong. You have to make sure they know, what we're focused on. We know this all started with Afghanistan, but it didn't end with Afghanistan. We've continued to see Biden go and send Blinken over there and try and make nice. Send Yellen over there, try and make nice. Send John Kerry over there and try and make nice. And in all these things, why are you doing that when they literally are responsible for killing 75,000 people last year because they're sending fentanyl across the border? Why are you doing that when they, basically sent a Chinese spy balloon over our airspace? And they're buying up land next to our military. They've bought the largest pork producer in our country. All of these things that they continue to do, why are we doing that? We now have malware that is in our systems that is going to basically, we don't know where the code is, but we know it's there, that's going to disrupt our power grid, our communications, our water supply. That's what China's done. So quit playing nice with them. And I think that's the problem is, America has been too nice to these people that want to kill us. And that's just not the way you handle it. You handle it with strength. You let them know what you expect of them, and you respond and let them know there's a price to pay if they do anything to challenge, threaten us, or any of our allies.
Ambassador Haley, like I said, 11 Russian and Chinese ships sailed close to the Aleutians, but not into our waters. It's the third straight year China has done this. Every time we send one ship, President Biden and Secretary Austin send one ship to the Taiwan Strait, the Chinese Communist Party goes nuts. I like the fact they sent 11 ships near us so that we can just flood the zone in the Taiwan Strait. Would you order that if you were the president in response to this?
Well, this is actually in response to the fact that we had exercises going on in the Taiwan Strait, that we had exercises going on in the, South China Sea. That's why China's doing this, is because they're upset. But understand, you look at a map and see how close they came to Alaska, and you combine that with the Chinese spy base that they're putting up in Cuba, which don't think that they won't send Chinese military there soon. You add that and look at how close they are to our soil. And if that doesn't send a chill up every American spine, I don't know what will. So, yes, if we need to go and put, ships there to show them what we're doing, but it's not so much that you do a tit for tat. It's fine. We can do that. But what I'd rather us do is have America strategize to get strong. The fact that China has the largest naval fleet in the world, they have 350 ships. They'll have 400 in 2 years. We won't even have 350 in 2 decades. Let's focus. The one thing that will scare China is to watch us strengthen our military, because they know that we have the best military in the world. If they start seeing us modernize our equipment, if they start seeing us focus on our Navy, our air, our, sea, to make sure that we're doing artificial intelligence, cyber, space, all of those things, they will suddenly start to realize that we mean business. Right now, they're just not scared of us. And
now, Ambassador Haley, I don't presume to lecture Brett Baer and Martha McCollum on what they ought to ask. They're the equal of any debate moderators. But you got a debate coming up this month. How many of the questions ought to concern the former President Trump's trials in his various jurisdictions, and how much ought to look forward, in your opinion? I'm not, I don't know what Brett and Martha are going to ask. They're very good at what they do. But what do you want them to pay? How much attention do you want them to pay to the former president's legal troubles?
Well, look, I have said, with this last indictment that came down, I'm tired of commenting on every Trump drama. And I think if they go and they want to focus on ratings, yes, they're going to throw and try and create more Trump drama. But I think we need to be focusing on how we're going to stop China. I think we need to be focusing on how we're going to close our border. I think we need to talk about how we're going to reverse Bidenomics and the fact that, people are still feeling inflation. And so, if they want to continue to talk about those things, to ask a question about him is one thing. To make the debate any more than that would be really just a waste of the American people's time. I think we've got too many issues going on in our country and in the world that, talking about more Trump drama is not going to get us anywhere. Talking about whether he is on or off the stage, that's totally fair game.
I will be right back with Ambassador Haley, who's agreed to talk to me off air for 4 or 5 more minutes, and I'll play that in the next segment. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, broadcasting from Studio North. Ambassador Haley is in Manchester today. If you go to nikkihaley.com, nikkihaley.com, you'll find out what time her event is. And, Madam Ambassador, what time is your event today?
My event is I will be doing a event in Hudson, New Hampshire at the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hudson Memorial Post.
All right, I'll be right back with Ambassador Haley. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm going to ask her about the change of venue of President Trump's trial right after this. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm back now with Ambassador Nikki Haley, who will be in Hudson, New Hampshire today at the Veterans of Foreign War Post. At what time, Ambassador?
That is going to be, I knew you were going to ask me that. That's going to be at noon.
At noon. So go on over there and meet the ambassador. I went down to one of her events in New Hampshire. It's great. I do want to ask you about not the former president, but about Jack Smith and the justice system. I think it's ridiculous to try the former president on anything, much less these absurd charges in the District of Columbia. And I have a Washington Post column coming out about them. Do you think a transfer of trial to a 50-50 district in the United States is necessary for at least the semblance of justice in this case, Madam Ambassador?
I do. I mean, look, a Republican can't get a fair trial in D.C., and I've long said that, January 6th was a terrible day, but Trump did not attack the Capitol. It's not a crime for him to say that he thinks the election was stolen. I mean, I just don't think you should prosecute him for that. But I don't think anybody feels like you can get, a fair case for a Republican in D.C. or New York. So, yeah, I think that changing venues would be totally warranted.
Yeah, 92% of the district voted for Joe Biden, 5% voted for Donald Trump. More importantly, he's got 100% name recognition and probably 100% opinions about him. In fact, when you go to the town halls, I bet you run into very anti-Trump people and very pro-Trump people. Is that the case?
It's interesting. Nobody really asked me about Trump. I mean, when we have town halls, nobody, asked me one way or the other about him. What they talk about is the fact that, we're in debt, the fact that groceries are still high, gas is still high. They worry about transparency in the classroom. They worry about crime. They worry about the fentanyl. They worry about the border. They really don't ask me about him.
Well, let me finish by telling you about the debate. I don't know what the rules are. Brett and Martha are the best. They're the equal of anyone in the business. So they'll have good questions. How much time do you want to spend talking to each other or responding to the moderators, Nikki Haley?
Well, I mean, look, I look forward to debates. I love debates. I think it's a great opportunity for Americans to see what all of their options are. And, as long as we're talking about real issues, as long as we're talking about the future of our country and not the past of our country, I think that it'll be a good thing. And so, look, I think Brett and Martha are fantastic as well. I mean, they're complete professionals and at the top of their game. And I think that we've got, a good slate of candidates. So it'll be an interesting debate for sure. And I look forward to it.
Ambassador Haley, always a pleasure. Keep coming back. Thank you for joining me this morning. I hope you find time to call Tommy Tuberville today. I appreciate your joining me.
Thanks so much. Go to nikkihaley.com.
nikkihaley.com if you want to find out more about her events in New Hampshire. Thank you, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you.
Welcome back, America. Everybody had a good time, but in Ohio, before you have a good time, I want you to get out and vote today, a special election in Ohio. I'm joined by Aaron Baer of the Center for Christian Virtue. Good morning, Aaron. How are you?
You.
How do we feel about the million votes that were cast? We want yes on Measure 1. How do we feel about those million votes?
We feel really good. Typically in an election like this, in any election, you see the left have a large margin of comfort, of padding going into election day. And by all means, they are certainly up right now by the data that we can see. We don't actually see vote totals, but we see turnout and in what counties they are. But it's not as large of a cushion as we would normally see, as we typically see for something like this. So we're actually feeling really good on the yes side. Because there's a lot of energy going on in Ohio right now, and we think Election Day is going to be big for us.
So, Aaron, I want people to understand what this is about. I hate initiatives. Initiatives were not provided for by the founders, and Republicans ought to hate initiatives because if you look at California, that's what's happened to California's initiative process. What would Measure 1 do if enough people vote yes?
If you hate initiatives, then you should love Issue 1, because if Issue 1 doesn't pass, we're we're going to have every issue you can imagine put into our state constitution. The ACLU and Planned Parenthood and the left have said as much in editorials in the Columbus Dispatch and everywhere, that they realize they can't win elections when up against people like Mike DeWine or JD Vance or even our legislature anymore. So they just have to try to flood the zone with enough political cash to put every one of their agenda items into our state constitution. So when you vote yes today, you elevate the threshold to amend the Constitution to 60%, so that only things that are widely agreed upon, that are foundational principles, go into our state constitution. And you don't have issues like abortion or like things that obliterate parental rights or things that take away Second Amendment rights getting jammed into our state constitution. If you want less initiative processes, less things going on day by day getting jammed in the state constitution, you should want issue 1.
You know, everyone, just look at California. California is the product of an untrammeled initiative process, many of which would never have cluttered up and destroyed California if there had been a 60% threshold. Now, that's not as high as a federal amendment to the Constitution, which requires 2/3 of both House and 3/4 of the states to pass it. And I hope we never go to a convention of the states. One of the reasons Mark Levin and I, one of the few things we disagree on is convention. I don't believe in amending Constitution. I believe in writing statutes through an intermediate elected representative. But in terms of turnout operation today, is the Republican Party turning out? This is not a partisan initiative, but is the Republican Party turning out votes? Yes. And I'm sure the Democrats want no, because the Democrats can't win an election.
Well, that's actually one of my favorite things about this whole election process is the Democratic Party, the Ohio Democrats, and actually Nancy Pelosi last night, of all people, came out and they've told people to vote no. But the Ohio Democrat State Party, their official constitution requires 66% of their vote to change their own constitution. Again, it's just the more hypocrisy from the left. But the turnout operation is massive today. You see the Ohio Republican Party driving voters out. But more than that, Hugh, we have seen churches, the body of Christ, rise up like we've never seen before, driving people out to vote. And you see a lot of just individual county parties. This really is going to be a grassroots victory because you see so many people heading out right now, putting signs out, texting their neighbors. I've already texted 20 people today. If you're listening to this, text every friend you have in Ohio to go vote yes. Polls close at 7:30. You can go to voteohio.gov to find your polling location and make sure you get out to vote.
I'm going to replay this in hour 3, so we cover both the early morning commuters and the later morning commuters, Aaron Baer. But let's talk about the fact, special elections in August. What a nightmare. People, there aren't as many voting precincts, right? So how do they find out where they're supposed to go and vote?
That's a great point. In this election, just because of the August timing of it, there's fewer polling locations than typically. Now, here's one thing already. You see the left coming out and saying, oh, they're trying to, this is Republicans or conservatives trying to take away voting rights and voting access. Well, no, these are actually, a lot of this is happening in blue counties where you have to have a county board of elections with a bipartisan vote to change polling locations. So this is just a practical thing that happens in an August election. And thankfully, our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, made a great website at voteohio.gov that tells people where to go find their polling location. I literally just did it just to double check to make sure my polling location hasn't changed. And it takes 2 seconds to go find it at voteohio.gov.
Now, Aaron, this is in the weeds, and I don't know if it applies. In California, if you show up at a precinct and your name isn't on the roll or they won't let you vote, you file a provisional. Should people do, is that allowed in Ohio?
You can file provisional ballots, but honestly, Hugh, anymore, it's so easy to find your voting location at voteohio.gov. And you've got 13 hours now to go vote. So that would be my biggest encouragement. Make sure you have your ID. We have voter ID laws in Ohio. That's the easiest way to make sure you get your vote counted, you get everything in. And that's what's going to make your day a lot simpler today.
Are you getting other members of the media, like my friends Bob Franz, Bruce Hooley, et cetera? Are you spending all morning on the radio getting out the vote?
Oh, we've already, I was on radio all last night, going to be on all day today, driving folks out to vote. Bruce and Bob Franz, they're doing a great job. Also, friends like Focus on the Family and Family Research Council. Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, Hugh. I don't know what can say without Marjorie Dannenfelser. She is a pro-life champion. We are blessed as a nation to have her leading the cause for us. And she and her organization at SBA Pro-Life America have really leaned into Ohio to help us both on August 8th and then what's coming down the road.
Now, Governor DeWine is not only very, very pro-life. Governor DeWine is also very pro-mediated democracy. In other words, he doesn't believe in direct democracy. He's been a United States Senator. He's been Ohio's Attorney General. He's been Ohio's governor. I think he was in Ohio State House for a while. Is he out there urging people to vote yes this morning?
Absolutely. Governor DeWine, Lieutenant Governor John Husted, Robert Sprague, our state treasurer, all these guys have really stepped. And even
David Yost, I'm sure.
Yeah, Dave Yost has been out there. Bernie Moreno's been out there just plugging away, doing rallies. I mean, you've just seen so many folks rise up. The left has poured millions into Ohio right now. And
out of state money?
All out of state. And you see, again, it's the Arabella advisors, the George Soros funds that are coming in because, again, Hugh, they know their agenda is so radical. They can never win in Ohio in a straight up election. But what they can do is they can flood the zone with their cash. And so this is why you're seeing folks like DeWine and all these other candidates step up and say, this is not the way it's supposed to be. This is something we've wanted to do for a long time. It's something the business community supports. It's not just social conservatives and things like that. Everybody who wants good, stable government likes this idea. Actually, 5 years ago, Hugh, when I testified on this idea at the State House, we actually had a Democrat co-sponsor on this. This wasn't a controversial idea a few years ago. But again, even in that timeline, you see the Democrats have moved so far left.
So the early vote, you concentrated, and other like-minded groups concentrated on the early vote. What do we think the blue lead is going into tonight's same-day balloting count?
It's anywhere between 50,000 on the low end and 100,000 on the high end, just on our rough estimates. And the reality of that is not a lot from what we're seeing right now. And when we were looking at these numbers last night, there was no early voting yesterday. There was 30 days of early voting before that, none yesterday. So that gave us a chance to digest this. And we got really encouraged by what we saw. Now, again, it's all about who we drive out today. This is no time to rest. But the reality is, you're seeing in rural counties and some of the more red suburban counties like Wood County up outside of Toledo, Warren County, Claremont County outside of Cincinnati, and even up in Delaware County just north of Columbus, you're seeing some really encouraging signs. And that's where we've had some of our strongest grassroots activity in those areas.
So if you're listening to me in Trumbull, Warren, on my Youngstown station down in Dayton, in Miami University, where I've got a station down there that serves Cincinnati, up in Toledo, and of course Columbus and Cleveland, get out there and vote yes on Measure 1. How long will it take, Aaron, to know tonight?
I expect we'll start seeing the first results probably around 8 o'clock is when you're going to see those early results. And again, nobody panic. Those are going to be those early votes that first hit. And then I would imagine by 9:30, we should have a good idea who's going to win this. And again,
when do polls close?
Polls close at 7:30, so it won't be long after the polls close that we actually start getting word on what's going to happen today.
And when did polls open, if they are already open?
They just opened 13 minutes ago. They open at 6:30 a.m. And so we've got a good time now to go get out and vote.
I want everyone, please, if you're in Ohio, go out and vote. And if you're not in Ohio, find somebody who is, send them a text message, call them up, urge them to get out and vote yes on 1. It matters for the country. We've got to stop in the initiative process because the left knows. That's why we have all these crazy Arabella advisor prosecutors north to south. Aaron Baer, good luck. Keep doing the media. Keep showing up. I'm surprised you're not wearing Cleveland Browns colors this morning. You could get out.
We
the
want to
Cleveland.
Win today, Hugh. This is about winning today.
Brutal. You just lost Cuyahoga County, but you're going to lose it anyway. Brutal. Thank you, Aaron Baer. Good luck to you, the Center for Christian Virtue. Everyone out there in Ohio, get going, get out and vote. Back to my China thing, or actually, I want to talk about the trial of Donald Trump. Yesterday, Donald Trump's lawyers were arguing against I think a completely out of line attempt to silence him in court, an order to control what the former president can say about what he discovers in the course of this. And I was on Brett Baer last night. I got asked about the trial of Donald Trump, cut number 4.
Hugh?
Well, thus far on the Trump trials, I do not see any reason that Judge Chutkan has to recuse herself in D.C., and I don't see any reason that Judge Cannon has to recuse herself in Florida. But I do see a big reason to get the president's second trial on federal charges outside of the District of Columbia. Not only did D.C. vote for Joe Biden 92% plus versus President Trump's 5% and change, but finding a jury pool there that does not have a firm, and it's like the heart of TDS syndrome beats inside of the Beltway. They've got to get it out of there. And if Jack Smith has any confidence in what I consider to be outrageous charges, I think they're really beyond the pale. They're worse than the McDonald case charges.
Yeah, we should explain. TDS is Trump derangement syndrome in Hugh language.
Yeah, that is. TDS lives inside the Beltway, Trump derangement syndrome. And Brett is right. I hate acronyms. I made a mistake last night. I appreciate Brett telling everyone. Trump derangement syndrome reigns in D.C. It's not because it's 92% Biden, 5% Trump. It's because he can't get a fair trial there. He can't get a jury pool. And it's not a J6 case. Don't talk to me about J6 precedent. This has got nothing to do with J6. And in fact, the indictment doesn't have anything to do with J6. And Jack Smith telling about the riot at the Capitol is just simple propaganda. This is a conspiracy set of indictments, and it's got nothing to do with J6. So please, District of Columbia Judge Chukin, I don't think you have to recuse yourself, but I think you ought to move that trial to one of the swing states. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. David M. Drucker is with the Dispatch. He's their chief political correspondent. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm great, Hugh. Good morning.
Mike Pence has made the debate stage. Do you expect anyone else to make the debate stage?
I think we're up to, what are we up to, 8 now, Hugh? I don't know that anybody else is going to make it. I know there are a few more candidates out there. They have until 48 hours before the debate, according to the Republican National Committee threshold and rules and all of that. But this might be it. And I think it means with 8, you can fit them all on one stage and you don't have to break it up into 2 nights or 2 different, groupings. So it makes it a lot easier to cover, a little bit more interesting. Of course, we still don't know if Donald Trump's going to show up.
Now, speaking of the former president, I was on Fox News last night with our next guest, Byron York, talking about, among other things, the former president's trial in D.C. Now, I don't think there's any reason that the judge in D.C. needs to recuse herself, but I do think they've got to move that out of D.C. I remind the audience, 92% for Joe Biden in 2020, 5% for President Trump, and more importantly, a jury pool of only some 400,000 people. And they hate Trump. I mean, it's just impossible for him to get a fair trial there. What do you think about a transfer of trial motion's likelihood of success? It doesn't work. Didn't work for the J6 defendants, but they are not 100% name ID or the former president of the United States. What do you think, David?
Well, I usually leave these questions to you, Hugh. I mean, these things are going to be argued over. What I find interesting, is there's a lot of scrutiny on Judge Eileen Cannon down in southern Florida. There's been a lot of scrutiny on, what a trial might look like in Washington. Everybody sort of parses these things like we're watching a football game. One good play, everybody's looking at what the ref called or didn't call. One bad play, and everybody's, looking at it the same way. I think we're just going to have to see how these things play out. I think sometimes, our legal system is a lot more resilient than people give it credit for, and it surprises people. Obviously, it's a matter of politics. If the president's either convicted or acquitted in either case, in either court, location-wise, people will use whatever they need to use to, or attempt to use what they have to their advantage to try and make whatever case they want to make here. But let's just see how it plays out is how I tend to look at it.
Yeah, but David, here, my concern is not actually with the former president. It's about confidence in the judicial system. If he is acquitted in a red jurisdiction in Florida and convicted in the deepest blue jurisdiction in the country, by the swamp, by the Beltway, I think the Americans on the 50-50 divide that is red will lose confidence in our justice system. And it's already been pummeled.
Right, and that's possible, and that's not just possible, it's likely. But if the reverse happens, people on the left side of that 50-50 divide will lose confidence and raise questions about the legal system and whether it's fair and just. And I guess what I'm saying to you, Hugh, is, in talking to both Republicans and Democrats voters, which is, of course, what the Dispatch pays me to do, the legal system is in a no-win situation because there are Democrats that already feel like Merrick Garland has given Trump unfair treatment to his benefit, that has slow walked this and been too soft, that Trump should have already been in jail, that he should have been treated much differently.
But
let
me interrupt you, David. That's absurd. That I know they believe that. I'm not doubting your correct assessment, but it's just absurd. I'm trying to be the reasonable man here. Send the cases to Wisconsin, or send them to Arizona, or send them to Pennsylvania,
right,
not Philadelphia, not Pittsburgh.
Right, but
send them somewhere.
Just to play devil's advocate, send them where in Arizona, where in Wisconsin, where is everybody on both sides of the divide going to feel good about this? I'm not arguing with you necessarily. What I'm saying
send it
is
to a 50-50 county. That's where I would go. I would go find a 50-50 county, because a jury pool that is selected from a...
That's at least a proposal that has meat on the bone there. And so I'm not arguing with you. But I think what I am doing here is just kind of taking your analysis and extending it and saying this is a very tricky situation, because I'm already seeing, if Trump is acquitted in the documents case in Florida, which looks to be much stronger, at least right now, than the January 6th case, which is in Washington, there are people that are going to yelp about the fact that, well, this was in Florida, this was a favorable judge, there were already always problems with her. Whereas, if Trump is convicted in Washington, they're going to raise all of these legitimate questions that you just raised. But I like the 50-50 county idea. At least it's something that is substantial from a political standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, there are places in the country that are evenly divided, and you can find them in a swing state. We know what the 4 states were. Send it to Georgia. Send it to Wisconsin. Send it to Arizona. Pennsylvania's got problems because Philly is corrupt. But send it to a suburb of Pittsburgh. I don't mind. But you can find a 50-50 county. And by the way, you are right. The strongest case is the obstruction of justice case in Florida. In fact, I think it's cut and dried. The documents case is nonsense, but obstruction is the strongest case against Trump. And so I'd send them all. I'd consolidate and I'd send. But right now, the only loser are the American people, because this is not working for them. David M. Drucker on X, the site formerly known as Twitter, and at The Dispatch. Thank you, David. I will talk to you again next week. Byron York leads off, as we did last night on the panel. We'll be talking about the trial of Donald Trump, or the many trials of Donald Trump, right after this. Stay tuned. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt from Studio North. We had a wicked bad storm this morning. I think D.C. got pummeled last night. Byron, you make it home from the special report set safely last night?
I did. There was a pretty audible boom while I was actually talking with Brett last night, but everything was fine.
It was a pretty remarkable storm up here. Byron, one of the things we were talking about last night, we ran out of time, was the proposed trial of Donald Trump in the District of Columbia. I am dead set against this because I'm worried about the justice system. Now, to review, the District of Columbia voted for Donald Trump with 5% of its votes. Joe Biden got 92% and change. 66% turnout, so it's a huge turnout. The jury pool is it's something less than 400,000 people. Donald Trump has close to 100% name identification, and probably as close, people know their opinions about him. I don't think he can get a fair trial in the District of Columbia. Do you?
No, I don't. It's been very clear. I think Trump, the short version is Trump had some pretty good luck with the location of the Florida trial, and he has really, really bad luck with the location of the Washington, D.C. trial.
Now, motions for transfers of trial under the federal rules of criminal procedure are very rare, but they can be granted. They are usually only appealed after a case is held. And there's an old case, U.S. v. Haldeman, in fact, I think it's a 1973 holding, that you can't do an interlocutory appeal. You've got to do it after the case is over, and you cannot move a trial unless you have trouble seating 16 jurors. Everything has changed since 1973. I mean, social media, ubiquitous coverage. Do you think the Trump lawyers will attempt to get it moved?
I think they will. I think what we've seen, they filed this a motion yesterday about the Smith wanting to make sure that Trump doesn't make public any evidence or something. And it was really big and really aggressive as this motion was, and they objected to pretty much everything about it. So I think you're going to see an all of the above defense from Trump that's actually quite aggressive at every step of the way.
Now, Byron, I think of you as being a reasonable man like me. And I'm not a partisan on matters of the judicial system. It is bad for the country if the District of Columbia convicts Donald Trump and the other three jurisdictions acquit him. You agree or disagree on that?
Well, that would be, you mean, wait a minute, you mean the Manhattan, well, it's not really a Manhattan jury. It's taken from the larger part of New York.
You can get some Queens people on there. That might get thrown out before they even get started. That's what I assume. But just assume for a moment 3 acquittals and a conviction in D.C. on charges never before brought against anybody, much less a former president.
Yeah, and also the one in which you're talking about that he would be convicted of by an all-Democrat jury is the most blatant, overtly political case of them all. And Republicans believe that all the cases are politically motivated, but so far we have 3, and 2 of them actually have their origins in elections. The Manhattan case is about events that took place during and after the 2016 election. And then this one is about 2020 in in January 6th. And the one we're going to see in Georgia, maybe today, maybe this week, maybe next week, obviously is from the 2020 election as well. So this one is the most political case of all of them, and you would have the most political jury.
Yeah, I've seen people like Andy McCarthy and George Washington University professor Jonathan Turley argue that this is an unprecedented stretching of statutes. If Jack Smith has confidence in his cases in D.C., he can move them to any 50-50 jurisdiction. And there are lots of counties in this country that voted 50-50. There are a lot of blue counties. There are a lot of deep red counties. I would do a trial transfer to anywhere that was close to 50-50 so we knew that the jury pool by county would be fair. And I can think of some Denver suburbs. I can think of some Arizona suburbs that are 50-50. I'd take a Tucson suburb, any place like that where the country is actually represented demographically, Democrat, Republican. And I just don't think there's ever been a precedent. Everybody has an opinion on Donald Trump. I mean, literally, Byron, do you meet anyone who doesn't know who Donald Trump is and have an opinion on him?
Did you see this new CBS poll? One of the questions they asked was, which concerns you more right now? Okay, a couple of choices. One, that Donald Trump tried to overturn a presidential election. Oh. 2, that the charges and indictments against Trump are politically motivated. Or 3, both. It was really totally...
That's it?
38% said the most concerning thing was that Trump tried to overturn a presidential election. 38%, same number, said the most concerning thing was that the charges are politically motivated. And 24% said both of them. So if you took that poll in the District of Columbia, it would be far.
It would be 100% both of them. Maybe 95% both of them. Yeah, that's what I just want Democrats who listen to my show to understand. It's not about Trump. It's not about Jack Smith, who I think is an out-of-control unguided missile. I think it's about the justice system in the United States coming out of this without people thinking it's absolutely banana republic time. And I don't see any Democrats making that argument. I'm going to make an argument in the Post today, Byron. I want to ask you about this before I put the finishing touches on it and edit. I don't think any serious person believes that President Trump doesn't believe that the election was rigged. Do you think any serious person doesn't believe that the president believes it? Not that it's true. I don't think it was rigged, but that he believes it's true.
Yeah. And listen, all sorts of people have talked with Trump. The indictment is filled with examples of people telling Trump that, no, you lost. No, there's not this amount of election corruption to change the results in any of these states. You lost. And Trump always goes back to believing that it was rigged in some way, that it was fixed in some way, that it was unfair in some way. And so the next rumor that he hears, there's a truckload of ballots here, there's dead people here, or all these people moved out of the state and their votes were still counted, the next rumor that he hears, he latches onto that. So I think Trump's belief that the whole thing was rigged, which he talked about before the election, by the way, is very, very strong.
I want to read you paragraph 83 of this indictment, which I've been over with a fine-tooth comb. On the evening of January 3rd, the defendant, President Trump, met for a briefing on an overseas national security issue with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and other senior national security advisors. The chairman briefed the defendant on the issue, which had previously arisen in December, as well as possible ways the defendant could handle it. When the chairman and another advisor recommended that the defendant take no action because the inauguration day was only 17 days away and any course of action would trigger something unhelpful, the defendant calmly agreed, stating, "Yeah, you're right. It's too late for us. We're going to give it to the next guy." Now, Jack Smith and his team obviously believes that's dispositive. No, it isn't. It isn't. It's like a football coach on the sideline who's down by 8 points with 10 seconds left on his own 2, who throws a Hail Mary or calls a hook and ladder. You know you're going to lose, but you don't give up the game, and you think you've got bad calls throughout. But it's not dispositive of anything. I think it's dispositive of the weakness of the indictment.
Well, it's indicative of the fact that Trump knew he was going to be leaving the White House in 7 days, not that Trump believed he had actually lost. And I do think, I mean, there's this idea in the left that Trump is so cynical that he knows he's lost. He's doing all this in a corrupt attempt to stay in power. On the other hand, it's pretty obvious that Trump has made winning a part of his entire psyche and persona for his entire life. And the idea of him convincing himself that he had won and that all this evidence that a number of people were citing and that others were saying was totally debunked, well, he was interpreting it as evidence that showed that he had actually won the election. Now, the idea that he was leaving, I mean, he left the White House on January 20th. It was a pretty ungraceful exit. He just got up and left, but he did. So it was obvious that he knew that the next president was going to take office, but he still thought and believes to this day that he had actually won the election.
Okay, Byron, quick exit. Is anyone on the left realizing what a deeply irresponsible prosecution this is? Not the documents case, not Manhattan, not Georgia, just the federal indictment in D.C. It's so irresponsible for Jack Smith to have brought this. Anyone on the left admit that to you yet?
Not that I've seen, but I would not be surprised as the weeks go by to see more and more emphasis on the documents case and less emphasis on this case.
I hope the Supreme Court takes an interlocutory appeal, orders its removal to a fair district, and maybe just outright dismisses it like Jack Smith did in the McDonald case. He's doing it again. Byron York on the site formerly known as Twitter, and at the D.C. Examiner, you can get his daily newsletter if you sign up for it, and you should. Thank you, Byron. I'm coming right back from Studio North America. Stay tuned.